everyone, and welcome to this plenary session. I want to begin by thanking the organizers, Aitor and his team, for having put this wonderful conference together. And I, moreover, want to thank SAAS board for having thought of me as a chair for this plenary session with poet and scholar Don Bogen. So thank you. And we have just had the first panel on the medical humanities, and I think this is a very good follow-up to our panel, because Don is also going to be talking about poetry and illness somehow. So it's an honor, it's a pleasure, it's a big honor to introduce Don Bogen. He's a good friend of SAAS. He has been attending our conferences for many years. He was telling me that he had to miss the Salamanca conference, and he was very much looking forward to this Bilbao conference. And again, it is such a shame that we cannot be together and see each other and talk to each other and you know, go out and have meals and fun, because that is also part of conferences. But anyway, at least we can see each other through this screen. So Don Bogen is Nathaniel Ropes Professor of English and Comparative Literature at the University of Cincinnati. He has been in that position since 2010. And before that, prior to that, he was a professor of English at the same university from, you know, 1997 to 2012. He has also been visiting professor and poet in residence at the University of California, Irvine. And he has been a Fulbright senior lecturer in Spain at the University of Santiago de Compostela and the University of Vigo. That happened in 2003. And that is why he's such a good friend of SAAS. Don is the author of 5 books of poetry. The latest one, the most recent one, is Immediate Song, 2011. Previous ones are An Algebra, 2008, Luster, 2003, The Known World, 1997, and After the Splendid Display, 1986. He's the author of a critical study called A Necessary Order, Theodor Roethke and the Writing Process. He has written reviews and articles on contemporary poetry, American poetry, in many journals, among them Dark Horses, Poets on Overlooked Poems, 2006, The Wilderness of Vision on the Poetry of John Haynes, 1996. He has published for The Nation, The Kenyan Review, and other journals. He's a translator of Spanish, so he has he's an active translator of contemporary Spanish poetry, including the work of Julio Martinez Mesanza and Juan Lamillar. And he is a recipient of many prizes for his work, including a Discovery Award, the Writer Emily Dickinson Award of the Poetry Society of America, and grants from the National Endowment for the Arts and the Camargo Foundation. So it is really an honor to have such an eminent poet and scholar again at our SAAS conference to share with us some of his poems that he uploaded in the website, in the conference website. In case you want to read them while he recites them, you may download that document from the website. And let me remind you that it is 6 a.m. Where Don is now. But so thank you also for accepting this this timing, and you know, and I would say that it's always good to read poetry at any time, even at 6 in the morning. So thank you, Don, for being here. Welcome again to SAAS. You know that this is your home, and let's hope we can see each other face-to-face in the next SAAS conference in 2 years. So Don, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a lovely introduction, and I want to thank you too for suggesting and inviting me to come as a plenary speaker. I have to apologize. I missed the the session on medical humanities, but it was at 3 in the morning my time, and six is something, but this is a real honor, and I'm sorry that I haven't been able to see you folks in the last, well, it'll be now 4 years, but I'm really hoping to get back to Spain in 2023. As you mentioned, I've been attending these since I had the Fulbright in 2003. I was invited to come to Vitoria, and I had a wonderful time. And then every couple of years, I think almost every session, so almost 20 years. And I've always enjoyed it, and the human contact. We have this, which is good, but it's not the same as being with people and eating and talking and all those other wonderful things. And I just, I was thinking about all my friends there, and I'm sure I'm going to miss a few names, but I just wanted to, send, a shout out to you, obviously, and to Viorica and Constante and Martin, Begonia. There's probably a few others, and I think are at the conference. I haven't seen the entire list, but I really looking forward to seeing everybody in 2023. As far as
let me interrupt you, Don. I always forget the last part of the introduction has to be the title, and the title is beautiful. Good. Beautiful. Timor, mortis, conturbat, me, a poetry reading. Yeah. Sorry.
Yes. No, your Latin accent is much better than mine. Yes, I was just about to mention that. And when I wrote, when I thought of that title, it does seem fairly appropriate. It's I know it from an old English poem, and the very last poem that I'll read in the reading is the newest piece, and that's a play on that title and different ways of translating that. So it was very interesting trying to make a reading focused on the idea of fear. So I'll say a little about each book or each thing that I'm reading, but I will, mostly concentrate on reading. I have this timed down to about 40 minutes, so that will give us a good amount of time for questions. So I'll just start. And as I say, as you've mentioned, there on the website, there are the actual poems, if you care to read them. For some reason, the PDF did not include italics. So the print, it's legible, but the print is all there, for book titles and things like that. There's, that all comes in the one typeface, but I'm sure it won't be a problem. I'd like to start. Oh, and I should mention periodically I'm going to be at 6 in the morning, and then there's this, which is So the poem I'll start with is actually one that I often start with, and it's about one of my more benign habits, and it's about a kind of individual fear, I suppose, but kind of a combination of the pleasure of solitude, but also the anxiety of being alone, which I suppose we're all feeling to some extent these days. It's called Run. Wanted solitude, feared it. Wanted to run, always somewhere new. Blank streets of the poor blocks, front yards with chain link fence, hospital buildings sealed, monumental. Wanted no faces in the windows, no visitors coming with roses. At places to turn back kept going. Wanted the loop larger, taking more in. Small abandoned factories that made boxes, candy, soap, soot-fuzzed louvers, glass underfoot. Wanted the lungs to tighten, 3, then 2 steps to a breath. Wanted solitude, kept turning off the big streets, found loose dogs growling in driveways, car parts on porches, sidewalks swallowed in weeds, gravel. Wanted the slide of gravel at sudden dead ends, having to turn back uphill. Wanted to slow but would not stop. Wanted to come back some different way. Yellow lamp glow of other lives, old parking lots, the closed off stories of cars dreamed up over and over. Wanted nothing known, all to be imagined. Glint of winter sunlight off windows, late streets empty, echoes muffled on brick. Feared solitude, but wanted the loop larger, wanted everything breath could hold. So that's Run. You'll have to excuse me if I'm drinking water at 6 in the morning. You know, it's a different experience for me. Now I'm going to read the one of two sequences in my most recent book, Immediate Song. And this is the sequence that opens the book. And it's actually originally my thought about preparing something for the conference, because it's a sequence about hospitals. I live right near a hospital, just about a block behind me. I can see it from my study window. And this is a 12-part poem. It's in a tradition of essay poems, essentially expository rather than lyric or narrative. It's in blank verse. And each of the 12 parts has a title that usually relates to something in the section. And one of the things I've enjoyed in this and the other sequence is this idea of, in a larger work, being able to put all kinds of different things in. And this one has various, obviously a hospital is a site, as I'm sure the panelists talked about, a site for both great fear of death, among other things, fear of injury, fear of loss, fear of loneliness, but also great hope. And the things that I've put in, that I was happy to put in, some of them are fairly grim. I mean, it's an ironic coincidence that when I was working on this, the original or most recent coronavirus scare, the SARS, it's SARS, was happening, and there was a lockdown in China and a lockdown in Toronto in Canada, where hospitals were sealed off. And there are various medical things in the poem, but I also have the birth of my children in there, and I have a little bit of a translation from one of Neruda's ode to the pharmacy that comes up at one point. I have a joke, kind of a grim joke, but a joke from my dermatologist from many, many years ago. So I enjoyed trying to get all these things in, and there's a reference to Thomas Mann and all kinds of stuff. But I hope under the general sense of a kind of meditation on hospitals and what they mean and their hopes, and also all the fears that they may raise. So as I said, this has 12 parts, and I'll read it straight through. And each part has a little title, and I'll, give you the title and all the way through. On hospitals. 1, grounds. The old ones held a varnished elegance, like mansions, cruise ships, or resort hotels. Quiet places, formal, set apart. You dressed up when you visited. The ease of a leisured past gleamed in their rooms. The vaulted lobby with mahogany desk, mail slots, and leather chairs where I waited with my father for my sisters to be born. The long open TB porch in the Hearts, or the solarium at Cowell, where my wife had mono as a student. Each morning she'd wake to cortisone and fresh orange juice, a view of campus in the lifting haze, damp redwoods, eucalyptus, and the steam of coffee rising from a china cup. 2, a run. Taxpayer opulence, generous care, a quaint nostalgia, I know. No room for it. Now everything is sleek down, corporate, high tech, medical centers with landscaping, tasteful signage listing doctors as groups and associates, intricate as law firms. The buildings themselves have shrunk, reproduced, and spread out into complexes, like the one I run through sometimes, a hospital village suffused on Sunday mornings with village quiet. I pass the closed clinics and rehab centers, construction sites abandoned for the day, garages almost empty, night nurses slumping at the bus shelter in scrubs like washed out pajamas. Few visitors at this hour, but once I saw a boy walking behind his mother in new shoes, bow tie, and stiff blue suit, carrying a rose. It snags the heart, that helpless love of the child who fears the parent may leave too soon, helpless parent afraid to leave the child too soon. It is always too soon. The hospital holds these feelings like a theater, an album flush with memories, a brain. 3, rooms. There are rooms for arrival, the green tiled vault where our daughter met the world, the lustrous hall buzzing with student doctors for our son, and rooms for departure with their tanks and screens, tangled nests of tubes, and endless humming as if you were inside a clock. When age thumps on your heart, thickens your blood, they need for you to drink this grayish milkshake now. Here is a cap for your newly bald head, a gown that ties in the back where you can't reach, your IV stand, a frail hat rack on wheels, will accompany you slowly, slowly to the awkward bathroom. Everyone here is nice but distant. Everyone in these rooms is tired but cannot sleep. Because you're old, you are a child again, like everyone here, taking your medicine from a little cup, trying hard to figure out how to please. 4, promise. This is for your own good. No way to say that, carrying our son back to the hospital each morning for a week after his birth, from the freezing car through tunnels, warmer now, his eyelids starting to flutter, lips to suck, to a waiting room, an office with a nurse who jabbed his heel. And you cried, my sallow one. Excuse me. No way to tell our daughter the X-ray machine adjusting its black beak above her skull wouldn't hurt, or that hurt might help, as in my childhood, when curtains in the gym were placed so that we couldn't see the nurse with alcohol, cotton balls, and fresh vaccine, the needles in wooden trays like silverware. We knew one of the boys would pass out, some girls would cry. In this ritual we performed one day in fall and again the following year, so we might all escape the iron lung. Public health. The clinic had marble stairs and cheerful woodblocks in the waiting room. A brisk lady doctor, good with children, dedicated, I'd like to think, not just shunted off here, whom my mother chose to give me the earliest vaccinations, who looked in my ears with a tiny light, listened to my breathing, tapped my knee, asked questions, answered those my mother had, and wrote out the prescriptions, showing by this how all of us could meet our needs, the lost, gleaming promise of the welfare state. 5, media studies. Hospitals look better on TV with hunky interns, music, and tight plots. The drug-addicted nurse, bubonic plague, a greasy terrorist keeps brandishing in a vial. Threats, then safety, and the news at 11. Now the hospital moves off screen a while. A last phase after the shootout or freeway chase. Heroic medic scenes with hospitals in jungles, mountain huts, bombed out cities, or field camps on the edge of the latest rubble-strewn battlefield add glamour to the show. But who would go to the hospital in real life, given a choice? We're scared of the procedures and costs, the bad news they may carry, a load of pain that grows, a narrowed future. So we hide until the ambulance comes to scoop us up. A run of tests, intensive care, and then the quick skid to the slab. Hospitals keep a special place for this downstairs, cold storage in the basement, the whole building a funnel to the morgue, vertical coffins, corpse silos, boxes of the grimmest facts. Their towers suggest the long odds stacked against us. 6, flags. In the first years after college, friends found work in towers linked to these, the labyrinths of medical insurance. Hall on hall of monitors and keyboards, padded headsets, and hidden clocks for time motion studies. Data on them was being entered as they entered data. Layers of observation stacked up like the cases on their screens. Trying to flag each doubtful claim as they'd been trained, they were flags themselves, placed in between things. A warning left inside the doctor's file, extra lid on the pill jar, bar on the hospital door, part of a dam diverting the stream of illness and its care to drive the whirling turbines of commerce. 7, compañero. English majors, systems managers there, they never lasted very long. Who would enjoy having to function as a block day after frustrating day? I suspect even the soldiers delaying the ambulance that carried Neruda to the hospital in the first days of the coup didn't want to tilt up the bed, search it for weapons, and check the passengers' papers. The man was dying. They could see that, and no threat. Because they followed orders, he suffered more. He had an everyday incurable cancer and kept on fighting against the blocked up world with rage and humor, calling himself the great urinator, inviting Nixonicide. Pharmacy, church of the desperate, with a little God in every pill. Often you are too expensive. The price of the medicine closes your clear doors, and the poor go back, jaws clenched, to the dark room of staying sick. May the day arrive when you'll be free, no longer peddling hope, and the victories of life, all human life over great death, will be your victories. 8, a joke. A guy goes into a hospital with stage 1 melanoma on his arm, has it removed, and asks the doctor, Lebanese from Beirut, with olive skin, black hair, and wet brown eyes, wild as Ernie Kovacs, how to prevent another cancerous mole. A one-beat pause, then, have genes like mine? A break for laughs, a handshake, and the doctor leaves the room, the braces on his shoes thumping the floor. The body is a weight the hospital can help us lift. And it's a kind of clock the hospital tries to read. There are times preset in your cells when things will get interesting. Tests in special rooms, cameras snaked inside you, you inside a beige machine that magnetizes you and clanks. How late is it? My turn now? Even the gorgeous rich who can afford trainers to help polish their good fortune have a particular spot in that waiting line and never can be certain where it is. 9. Dictionary. Hospital, from hospes, a guest or host, neither stays very long at the ospitale or inn. Administrators leave at 5, patients are discharged, and doctors zip between wards and their offices in the world like scouting bees. The buildings themselves imply the temporary, with curtains, partitions instead of walls, and multi-purpose rooms. Wings open up and shut down. Entrances are swallowed as exteriors become interiors that don't quite fit, and age cracks out through paint and plaster till at last the whole structure is smashed by wrecking balls or picked apart or imploded as we watch on TVs that might as well be screens charting our own collapse. A hospital then as heap of rubble, memento mori, a transient guest house housing transients. 10. Sealed rooms. Sometimes there are unexpected stays in Toronto, in Guangzhou. Hospital as prison suddenly, the inn locked down, and liberation comes at calendar pace. To question every breath, each fluctuation of body heat and weight. And waiting, think how time opens some wards and seals off others, cuts to the chase or seeps into your bones. Relentless, uncomfortable meditation, the hospital and your fears have boxed you in. What virus will hop next from the stacked cages to the kitchen, that plane you took, your bed? When it catches up with you, will you be caught on a locked floor or wandering alone in the dead end maze of managed care? 11. Wheels. Nightmares, real and imagined. Just telling them consoles and half prepares me for bad news. But it's indulgent too, as when I see the warning signs with their black steer horn points on latched cases in the examining room and wonder, if I put my hand inside, what would I pick up? Curiosity starts spinning its little wheel that makes the big wheel turn. Grim causes leading to their grim effects, but also plans and hopes, new ways to meet our needs, some victory perhaps over great death. The old funicular lurches. We rise through fog and thinning pines. Odd dreams peek out, regrets, scenes from the past, disconnected facts glaring, then lost in clouds that fade as everything at last comes clear. It's true Herr Kastorp is ill. Why would he spend time up here otherwise? 12. Windows. When I stop again and look up from the page, staring out across the bare tree limbs above the neighbors' roofs, I see the tower of Good Samaritan Hospital. Today, someone in the children's ward has taped folded paper snowflakes, big as hands, across a strip of windows. Scissor cut, symmetrical, they magnify a dream of winter joy outdoors for those who have to stay inside. From this distance, they seem like real snowflakes, just a gauzy blur. But up close on my window, I see ice dots and small white leaves that melt against the pane, spreading a screen of drizzle between me and the cheerful nurses there. Cheerful? I can't know that. But why not imagine children's needs, or anyone's, at the inn where most of us will stop one day? I'd like the nurses cheerful as they move through halls where someone took the time to think about the color of the paint. I want the hours unrushed, the doctors calm, the children warm, well cared for, ready to come home in just a day or two. It occurs to me that that sequence is very much anchored in a particularly American experience of what's called managed care, private commercial medical care. And we don't, as you know, we don't have a much of a national healthcare system. Everything is based entirely on private and often commercial profit-making enterprise here. So it's on one level, that poem is probably a huge argument for some kind of public, socialized medicine, which I realize also has problems, but that is a distinctly American element in that poem. I want to read now another sequence from the book, and this is not so much about the fear that we might feel in a situation like a hospital, in a governmental situation where people are worried and that they may even die because they can't afford their care, but more about the manipulation of fear, and by those who perpetuate fear. And I'm thinking specifically about war. This is a mixed sequence, shorter than the other ones, different forms, different focuses in time. It actually starts in when I had the good fortune to spend some time on the Mediterranean at the Camargo Foundation in France, and includes a kind of reference that came out of my wonderful experience as a Fulbright lecturer in Santiago and Vigo. I came across a picture of Santiago in a very small chapel somewhere, and other things. And then it refers to different experience of war going back to my not so much my childhood, but my adolescence during the Vietnam War, when I worked for the US Post Office. Some very specific things about the American invasion of Iraq and the torture associated with that, and other wars in the Middle East. And I'm sorry, it's a rather grim thing, but this is a conference focused on American fears. So I will read this. And it starts with a translation of the Cid, El Cantar de mi Cid. My own little translation of just a couple lines. That's the epigraph. And it's a notebook. I mean, it's essentially just entries of different sorts in a notebook. A notebook, and here's the translation. In these foreign lands, they will see how we build our houses. They will see with their own eyes how we earn our bread. I wanted to write something about the flags there, pennants in a clanking harbor, their clean colors brightening the sky, wind ornaments, calls over distances, beacons, prayers, for fishermen just coming in with the dawn's catch, for sailboats, yachts, and the fireboats and rescue ships looking out for them all. Each morning in that small port on the Mediterranean, these banners lifted my heart. I wanted to sketch their billowing changes and my own good fortune in being there to see them. Yet all around me, though I hardly noticed them in the strict light of that exotic place, were the flags of nations with their imperial symbology, a cross, keys, tower, stars, a slit moon, bundle of sticks tied with a cord. They floated there in abstraction, assertion, dream, rule, threat, driving toward perpetuity in everything they claimed. I remember the flag in that church painting because the map was changing and the country needed a myth. The saint took on a special banner and a new name. On horseback, James, now Santiago Matamoros, displays a small battle pennant decorated with scallop shells. His face is blank and slightly girlish, his body enclosed in a carapace of armor, like a shiny beetle propped upright on a stallion. From his free hand, a blade dangles. Beneath it, the lopped heads of his enemies, bug-eyed, stunned, round as bowling balls, festooned with Turkish mustachios, a Gothic version, the painter having never seen a Moor. The saint looks bored. He is clearly beyond this. Preacher, faith healer, martyred apostle, dragged back to earth to crank up the reconquest. What is the comparison between these two photographs? The Marine hunched and weeping after saying goodbye to his daughter. The Iraqi boy wounded, gauze wrapped loosely around his neck. Reduced to raw feeling, both pictures draw us to the eyes. The Marines stunned on the edge of despair. The Iraqi boy's dark slits. Delicacy of eyelashes, beating almost imperceptibly, and the shallow cups of bone protecting the places where the brain gathers light. The fragile globes of fluids and nerves, their lenses tuned to all around them so miraculously. The camera pulls us to these wet surfaces of the face. We would question, we would console, reflections of our own eyes imagined inside them. Oh, human forms divine. Blake chatting naked in his garden with Mrs. Blake, autodidact, draftsman, seer of vision, certifiably mad. In the tame South London summer, streaks of cloud and changing shadows, narrating heavenly wars, illuminating the villains, their stiff white beards and cracked eyes, lined muscles, merciless limbs, who haunt, he saw in his madness, the world in which we live, world of empires advancing, of famine, plague, the hapless soldier's sigh splattered across the walls of ancient cities. The library is in their path, beautiful thing, aflame. Parchment, papyrus, rag paper, all the ingenious surfaces that keep words light and lasting, black ash caught in the updrafts. Beautiful thing, aflame, and the outsides transforming more slowly. Blisters on calfskin, holes in smoldering cloth, expanding till the bright tongues leap from their hearts. Beautiful thing, aflame. Law codes, old Torahs, a much copied doctor's manual from the capital of Western learning at Cordoba. Soldier, looter, arsonist, commander. The library is in their path. Beautiful thing, aflame. The boxes are rough because there are so many and because of the hurry. The pit is open and beginning to fill. The boxes are narrow, each laid out in front of a number on a sheet. Workers are scurrying. The photo can't show weeping in another room. Because the image of God is forbidden, writing itself becomes illumination. On each plywood lid, a name swooping in black paint. Simple identification as prayer. The boxes will be moved from the pit when the shelling is over, but now they have their place in the history of collective retribution. One family caught driving away from their house in Tyre. In the country of water, between two rivers, valley of green crops staving off the sand, country of cities ancient as trade, and the first words cut into stone to record it, birthplace of the patriarch, of tribal dreams, a garden called paradise where 4 rivers flowed, a garden hanging from palace walls, country of empire, of exile and slavery, of towers like all towers, marking power, achievement, pride, under stars recorded and studied for 5,000 years, on earth worked into fertility even longer. By these waters I sat down and wept. I remember taking the flag down and carrying it in when I worked at the post office. In the dry heat of summer, the jungle war overrunning our TVs. How it had to be folded a certain way with triangular flips and neat undertucks, as it would be outside the Capitol or at a scout meeting or at an airstrip over coffins about to be shipped home. Rattle of that flagpole where the town met the parched arroyos as the Santa Ana began to pick up near the end of August, threatening fire. Rattle of that blank mast, rope, and pulley, like a snake met alone on a canyon path, like knuckle bones kept as souvenirs in a hollowed out skull. War as the blind pig rooting, wet snout pushing up craters, foxholes, berms, snuffling, dismembering, scattering wreckage and blood, its 4 feet stiff hoofed balances, neck a shaft, digging for what is buried, what, anything it doesn't know, not hunting, not scavenging, just thrusting and ingesting, all touch and instinct, everything turned over, pushed apart, pressing on, pressing, innocent and relentless. Who set the studded collar on that stub of neck? Who, standing back a bit, holds the leash? Another emblem there, the man on the box, wires dangling from the fingertips of his half-drooping extended arms, the hood giving his head a strained, searching pose. 2 triangles then, a small one capping a large, on a little stalk set awkwardly on a pedestal. Dark Christmas tree, scarecrow, crucifix, sheeted ghost. Terrible this rush to metaphor, escape into simplification and irony. Terrible the minds dreaming up the scene in all its intricacy, from the blinding to the phony wires and sad exposed feet, advised by doctors, free to act as the quick will decides in the surface of an assertion, service of building up fear that makes the muscles tighten, the sphincter release. I am trying to draw a line across this icon. I am trying to take my hands off the wires. I think what I will do, given the time limitation, is well, we have till yeah. No, I will skip to the very last one. And if you'd like to read "Pedestrian Song," which is my little paranoid poem about being a pedestrian among drivers, please do. But I'll actually move, I'll read now the last one. So that'll give us, I think, if I'm looking correctly, maybe 15 minutes for questions. So I'll read this one. I want to thank everybody again for attending. And I'm hoping that after I finish this and can set up for questions, that I can somehow figure out a way to see everybody's face in little boxes on the screen, but I don't know that I can. This is the one that gives the title to the reading. As I mentioned, it's a song-like poem. It's basically like a song, very short. And each of the stanzas in the poem involves another translation, another way of translating, particularly the word conturbat. Another way of translating Timor mortis conturbat me. And this is the most recent and obviously has something to do with the current situation. Old song. Too small at this point to be seen, cancer leaves a bill to pay. Fear of death unsettles me. Timor mortis conturbat me. I worry, staring at the screen, if I should get on a plane. Fear of death perplexes me. Timor mortis conturbat me. Masked and anxious on the street, I grow more distant with each day. Fear of death bewilders me. Timor mortis conturbat me. Time calls the tune relentlessly. I'm dancing up against my age. Fear of death unravels me. Timor mortis conturbat me. What am I scribbling on these sheets? A song to make it go away? Fear of death plagues all my days. Timor mortis conturbat me. Thanks very much. Now I'll see if I can see everyone.
Well, I invite everybody to connect your cameras because Don has asked us to be visible. So if you wouldn't mind connecting your cameras.
Oh, that's why I can't. Okay, yeah, all I see is you and something called room support, and everybody's camera's been, as well as their voices being muted.
Exactly. I don't know if the organizers can say whether everybody can connect their cameras or not. Yes, can they? So at least some of you, if you will be willing to connect your cameras so that Don can see us.
I don't have to. That's fine. I'm tired of, I like looking at you, Isabel, but I'm tired of seeing myself.
There is no way they can connect their cameras? No?
Okay, that's fine.
Claudia, we can't connect the cameras. Okay, well, unfortunately, there must be restrictions, so they cannot connect their cameras. Anyway, Ron, thanks for a wonderful reading. I like that you not only read, but also explained the context around all of the poems. We have until 10 past, according to the program, so we have 10 minutes for questions. I see some message in the chat. Yeah. Yes, wait a moment. Okay, apparently they are going to make it possible to connect the cameras for the Q&A, because otherwise it's weird that you cannot see who's talking to you.
That's fine. No. Yeah. I talk on the phone. Yeah, I can imagine, you know.
Yeah, well, yeah, of course. But this is different.
Oh, it's Begonia.
Begonia, yes. Amaya, Aitor. We see the names. We don't see the faces. Oh yes, we see faces now.
Aitor. Hi.
Yeah, everybody's here. Amaya, yes, Begonia. Claudia,
this is great.
You.
Thank you. Hi, Bogen.
This is becoming to be more humane.
I'm getting smaller and smaller. I'm getting smaller and smaller.
Less fearful.
Oh, that's great. This is as it should be. That just should be. I should get smaller and smaller before I disappear.
Esther, yeah, Lali.
Oh, look at that. Oh, that's great.
Okay,
that's
anyway,
great.
while everybody connects their cameras, we have 5, 6, 7 minutes for questions. If anybody wishes to ask something,
Martine,
please
hi.
just activate your mics and just speak out. Hello,
So
Mark.
maybe I'll ask the first one.
Aitor?
Don, thank you for
Yeah,
being
hi.
there at this very inhospitable time for you. So sorry about that.
Oh no, it's fine. I'm wide
Uh,
awake, and
all right.
I'm not,
So my
it's
question would be in the first part of the reading when you were telling us about hospitals, I felt a kind of nostalgia for old style
yeah.
hospitals versus more corporate type
Mhm.
of do you think that is part of your aging or the way hospitals are being generally reformulated because it is happening I think here as well with some clinics and so on.
Uh-huh.
So why do you think is it just that looking back in time, now there is always that feeling, now that things
Yeah.
were different and sometimes better, no?
Mhm.
Or, or,
Mhm.
or or do you think it is that that is really happening, that hospitals are turning perhaps less human nowadays than they were in the past?
Yeah, I think it has happening a bit, but there's a definite element of nostalgia, and something I have to work against a little bit. The older I get, the longer my past is, and I do remember. My background is very modest, and I remember going. I have three younger sisters, and going to the hospital while my sisters were being born, and it was like a very fancy hotel. And I mean, I think medical care technologically is obviously much better than it was 60 years ago or whatever that was. But I do think in this country, at least, and I can't really speak for countries in Europe, the commercial element has become so dominant. And it's not so much the hospital itself, it's the in between things here, like an insurance company that is deciding like whether they will pay for a certain kind of operation. And I know decisions have to be made, but I miss the sense of a kind of public health, a dimension of care that way. So yeah, but there's definitely some nostalgia. It's a very good question. Yeah.
We have 5 minutes. I'm very careful with the time, but Ron, I would love to ask you a question. I'm very interested in titles. What made you call your book Immediate Song?
Oh, yeah. Well, this is a good plug for the book. You have to buy it. You have to order it. It's it was a there's a bunch of questions. The hospital sequence was one of the first things I wrote. So that's why it refers way back to the SAAS epidemic and all that. But there are a number of short poems similar to the one that I read at the end, Old Song. They are in rhyme and meter. You could probably hear a sort of music to them. And the last one is called, it was written fairly early, it's called Immediate Song because it's a song about, it ends with this phrase, a moment, a moment. And it's a song about being in the present. And I think the sense of immediacy is something I kind of strive for, but there are many paradoxes there. Obviously, I'm writing this at some point in the past. I'm revising it. It appears in a book, if I'm so lucky as to have a book published, and yet it's a moment that I'm you know I'm capturing. I mean, that poem, I don't really have time to read it. It's the end of the book, but it's basically about me staring out a window, which I think is my most common writing activity, is staring out a window. I'm not in trying to write something, um, and just seeing what's out there and being in the immediate. So that about half of immediate's, well, no, about a third of immediate song is these very short lyric poems, and then it has this long hospital sequence, and that notebook, kind of anti-war sequence. But the songs are the anchor of that book. the work I'm doing now is quite different. I still write songs, like, I mean, these are not songs to play on guitar, but I mean, they could be, I suppose, but yeah, that's why it's called that. Yeah.
I have
Thank
a
you.
question.
Yes, yeah, Lali, of course.
It's a very short one.
Yeah.
Dawn, thank you for such a wonderful poetry reading. Just a very short question. Do you believe as a poet, as an artist, in the social role of poetry nowadays?
How do I feel about that? Yes, I do. I actually
Yes.
it's very important to me. I realized that, you know, if I really wanted to be a spokesperson or have any effect, I sure wouldn't write poetry. I'd write something else. I'm writing poetry because it's important to me individually, and for sorting out, it's a way that I can sort out my life. This is a kind of interesting thing. I mean, if someone magically said, what a horrible fate, but if someone said, you will never publish a poem again, you will never be able to publish a poem again, no one will ever see your work, which, you know, when I send work to magazines, there are times when I get all my rejection slips that I think maybe that may be the case, but I know that I would still write. But I do think that the artistry, the things that you can do with poetry, like the Notebook sequence, it's very, very political. It's me, you know, I was trying to figure out, like just at the beginning, I had this wonderful period of being in a little town on the Mediterranean, and I loved seeing all those sailboats and things. But then I realized I kept seeing all these symbols of government, and of course the symbols are from all different times of history, and there's a lot of things about the Middle East in general, and about Islam and Christianity and those things in the poem. And I think a poem can make a kind of political statement in a way that a speech, even, or you know, or an action, or fiction, or an essay cannot, even though the audience being reached is much. But I do think there's on my study wall, when my son was very, very young, one of the earliest things that he was drawing, you know, just doodling on paper. He was like 3 or something, you know, how they make little marks. And he made different circles, and he made something that looked like Saturn. It was like a ring around a round thing. And his mother asked him, he couldn't write at that point, just draw. His mother asked him, what was this picture, you know, on paper? And he said, the whole world. And I put that up in my study because it seems to me that that's what a writer should be engaging, the whole world. And of course, a lot of it is me, it's personal, but it includes news, it includes, the differentiation between social and political and individual is, you know, it's fuzzy, it's complicated. But that's my goal, is to try to write about the whole world. I probably was reading, Immediate Song has many simple lyrics, very much from the heart, very personal, but it also has all my books have a social dimension. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Don. I think we have to stop now, even though, if there were corridors, we would continue with the conversation. Please join me in thanking, if only with your gesture, a big
Thank you so much
for Don's wonderful reading. And of course, it was beautiful to see your little faces, not only your names. And I hope we proceed with this tendency in the next plenaries. At least we see each other a little bit more than just seeing the names.
Good, yes. And in 2 years, I will be there. I'll see you all. Thank
you will be very welcome.
Yes.
Thank you, Don. And we have to rush the next session. Thank you. Bye-bye.